Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. Super Sunday and Super Tuesday are finally over. One produced a clear winner. I was at the Giants parade. But no parades yet for Barack or Hillary or Mac, Mitt or Huck. We can't talk about the Giants today, but the wise guys are here to talk about the meaning of Super Tuesday. The winners, the losers, the statistics, the strategies, but also their personal reactions to Super Tuesday and the entire presidential campaign of 2008, past and future. With me are Sheryl McCarthy, host of CUNY TV's 1-to-1, David Birdsell, Dean of the School of Public Affairs at Baruch College, and Micheline Blum, the director of the Baruch Survey Research. Welcome all. Let me start with the personal question. What is the significance of the 2008 presidential election to you personally so far?
Well, that it's really important to get George Bush and the Republicans, out of the White House. I mean, I think a lot of Americans feel that way, that you need a major change, that they've made a real muddle of it. And the other thing is that you have, for the first time, you have a black person and a woman who are really viable candidates for the presidency, and that this might suggest how far we have come as a country, that we might not put another elderly white man into office.
Wait a minute, I'm getting there. I mean, that's okay. But I'm not taking...
So these things are really, those things are certainly historic.
Excellent.
I think I would certainly second those comments, although I think that we have yet to see in the general election how well an elderly white man does against either of those candidates. But I think the other thing that to me is extraordinary and exciting this year is the turnout, is how many people are really interested in the election this year and voting, and to see young people who don't always care that much and don't always showing up this year. That to me is personally very exciting.
David.
I'm fascinated by shifting coalitions. I'm fascinated by the emergence of new models and embodiments of leadership. I think that's important to us as we look at a campaign that I think ultimately will begin to reshape the American landscape, political landscape. Even if it doesn't make that happen in a single campaign season, and it probably can't in a solid way happen in one cycle, this is the beginning of, it seems to me, something that's different, regardless of who wins, regardless of which party occupies the White House. And it's an exciting season for all of the reasons that Sheryl and Mickey described.
So you're suggesting that this election is, if not a critical election, a reconfiguration, it's certainly a change election.
Absolutely. It's one of the things, we haven't heard some of the language that we've heard in campaigns past about seven dwarves, when you have people who can't necessarily get over the top. We're looking at people who represent very different models of what it means to lead the nation, very different visions of America and its role in the world. I have my preferences, but I think that having those choices fairly starkly outlined, it's going to be impossible to sit like Ralph Nader in Florida in 2000 and tell us that there's no difference between the top party candidates.
Is there something in the numbers, Mickey, that sort of jumps out at you, that talks to this?
Yes, there is, and I think first of all, the enthusiasm, just the sheer numbers have been, amazing and interesting. And then I think in terms of the shifting models and shifting coalitions, the things that struck me last night were two things. One, that the extraordinary Hispanic vote for Hillary Clinton, that it wasn't just that she won the Hispanic vote, but she ran away with it. She got 3/4 of it in New York, 2/3 of it everywhere else in the country. That was amazing.
A firewall for her.
And then that white men voted for Barack Obama. I think we wondered what was going to happen after Edwards dropped out, and I think that's very instructive for what might happen in the general election.
Do you see the American electorate voting for a black man or a white woman in 2008?
Well,
are the conditions right? Are the candidates right?
I think there are a lot of people who are excited by that prospect and what it might say about Americans and their open-mindedness. But I think, if you have, once your opposition is John McCain, there's a whole other, I know as a columnist, because I hear from them, there's a whole other ugly underside of America, and they haven't been, I don't think, felt free to speak out, but they might start rising to the surface, in the general election. But one thing, that really impressed me last night was, how much, not just the white male vote, but of how many white voters Barack Obama attracted. When I fell off to sleep at around 1:30, I heard it was about 40% at that time. That's a large chunk. But also, I was surprised by how many African American voters he got. 6 months ago, I think so many of them were leaning to Clinton because they thought she was the one who was electable. And as time went by, as he won Iowa, Black people began to believe that they could win the White House. And that's a major shift as well.
Right. I mean, what struck me was the state of Idaho. I don't know how many blacks make up Idaho. I didn't look at the census data. But he won 79% of, admittedly, a caucus. But like Iowa, you're talking about white folks.
North Dakota.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
He actually won in those very white, generally Republican states.
One of the things.
And I think there's a reason for that. I mean, those states generally skew Republican anyway. And and as for the Democrats, it's not unusual for Black candidates to do well in places where there are few African Americans, because there are fewer African Americans, there's less tension between the different groups. So I mean, that's something that you see. But that impressed me as well.
Okay. Surprises? What struck you last night and said, wow, I didn't expect this?
Well, I want to stay straight where we are.
Oh, okay. Go.
Just because I think one of the things that struck me was exactly this shifting pattern of coalitions. And the sharp youth preference for Barack Obama. At one level, no surprise. On the other hand, its intensity is surprising.
And
that
it's
was
solid.
interesting.
It continues.
The very fact that we can be speculating this morning about the prospect of a young and middle-aged white male black voter bloc, that didn't exist before yesterday. Nobody could even talk about it. And I'm not going to suggest, I think Sheryl's right, to raise questions about its stability. But the very fact that it was there and there in large numbers, we're talking about millions of people. We have never been able to sit around a table like this and say that. That's a remarkable thing. And saying that while 80%, 8 in 10 of each of those Democratic voters said that neither race nor gender was an important factor in their selection. Now, we can doubt their response, but that's what they told us coming out of those polling places.
But assuming that that's correct, one of the things that struck me about who won what is John McCain won a lot of states that he ain't going to win in November in all likelihood, and Barack Obama won state, well, Hillary Clinton did too, won states that he ain't going to win in November. So you've got this interesting dynamic that voters in the opposite party of the likely voting in the state are selecting the nominees for both parties, in fact. It was odd. You were going to say something.
No, I think I lost it.
Okay. Surprises. I'll start with you, David.
This isn't necessarily a big surprise, but the starkly different perception of economic ruination between Democrats and Republicans. Upwards of 90%, 93%, I believe was the national number, of Democrats think that the economy is in terrible or poor shape. Whereas Republicans, just a little bit under 2/3 share that feeling, and fully 34% of them think that things are just hunky-dory. And that is a sharp difference going into the election. Probably not bad news for John McCain, who doesn't get his highest marks for stewardship of the economy.
Right. Good. But the economy is the issue really on both sides. Yeah. And will be going forward if yesterday's stock market is any indication. I mean, I think that, it will matter a great deal, and I think it's something that will just continue to grow. I think that it's unlikely that Iraq will be the issue, and also once we get into a general election and you really are talking to both sides, that is the one issue that talks to both sides. I think one of the things that was interesting to me yesterday, while I don't know that I necessarily believe people who say that race and gender weren't important to them. I think that they don't always realize that they're important. That isn't the thing that in their minds is the reason that they're voting for someone, but I think it may have to do with who they identify with and how they feel comfortable, so I think it does matter. I think the thing that was interesting, though, was that Democrats said that they would be satisfied with either of their candidates.
Yep.
It's clear that Democrats actually like both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, whereas on the Republican side, that cannot be said for McCain, Huckabee, Romney. A lot of people on the Republican side don't like one or more of them.
Talking about the Republicans, though, I know you Sheryl, are, you know, taken with, in some sense, John McCain and his character. Talk about the other Republican candidates.
Well, I mean, the soulless Mitt Romney.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's soulless Mitt Romney.
And I think Americans, I think that's what came into play. I'm very happy, you know, even though I am a liberal, progressive Democrat, I'm very happy for John McCain because he is, you know, one of the few candidates on either side who really stands for something, who has some principles that he's willing to back up, even if, you know, even if they hurt him. I think, and I think that's what people caught on to, just as they caught on the people who are like Huckabee, you know, in terms of their religious values and their conservatism, you know, went for him. And I think they sense that Mitt Romney is sort of an empty suit. He'll turn any way that's advantageous for him politically, and there's nothing there.
If you look at the race, you've got a two-person race on one side, and I would argue a one and two-half candidates on the other race. It's John. Am I right? John McCain's in command here, and it's basically a matter of time. But McCain has had a problem. I mean, looking at the numbers again, those who considered themselves very conservative did not go to John McCain, and he split, you know, a fractured conservative vote. And if you look at the states that Huckabee won, all southern states, conservative states, going to Sheryl's point, does McCain have to make promises to the right as the candidate that damage him in a general election?
Well, he's already begun making promises to the right with respect to fiscal rectitude, for example, and his tax cut promises.
And he was in the pro-life, if you will, parade somewhere or another, as I recall. I'm sorry.
Exactly. This is a long way from the candidate who denounced Jerry Falwell as an agent of intolerance. And we're going to, I think, continue to see some of that migration. It's not going to happen in the primary, though, because he's got Huckabee protecting his flank.
Right.
And so the interesting thing is going to see what happens, not even after the convention, but between the anointment and the convention. How does he reposition himself in the party?
Exactly. And then again reposition himself, perhaps, for the general election. Now, you mentioned Huckabee protecting McCain's flank.
That's right.
There seems to be a real personal liking between McCain and Huckabee, and a real loathing almost between McCain and Romney and Huckabee and Romney.
Yes.
And between Romney and everybody else.
And Romney and
Romney
everybody
and
else.
everyone.
We know you don't like you don't like Romney. How does this play out? Does one of them drop?
Well,
how does this work?
Well, I think part of the question is Huckabee at this point running to be vice president, and is that part of his, you know, is he really staying in and sort of protecting John McCain and helping John McCain and staying very friendly with him? And ultimately hoping to get the vice presidential.
And he has nothing else to do. He's got a pension. He lost all that weight. He can go fishing. I mean, you know, like
and the
John
gift
Edwards.
stream is run out.
I mean, to a certain extent, John Edwards was a professional presidential campaign. Huckabee could be in that same role. Go ahead, Dave.
One of the things that's very interesting, for the first time in a long while on the Republican side, you see one candidate breaking out the Bible Belt, and that band of Huckabee states is the Bible Belt, pure and simple. And that really poses a challenge to the party. How do you integrate this part of the Rovian base and make it part of the major candidate strategy? And it is far from clear how that happens today.
So the Reagan coalition is Humpty Dumpty, and you can't put it together again, or it's got to be put together in a different way that doesn't look like old Humpty.
Different glue.
Different glue. Okay.
Right. It could be. It's that this year there was no one candidate who spoke to all those different parts of that coalition. they kept looking for it. I mean, there was, the hope that it would be Fred Thompson, that there would be someone on the Republican side who would somehow unite those groups and get that coalition back. It didn't really happen, and so you're seeing that now, which is why you have the one candidate and the two half candidates.
Now, if McCain wins, does the right stay home? They're not going to Hillary or Obama. The negative is, do they stay home, or does the candidate that the Democrats nominate really affect us? For example, does Hillary stimulate the base to come out where an Obama might not? I don't want to get into
we
future
know
strategy.
Ann Coulter would vote for a Democrat if McCain wins. So she said.
Yeah.
But I don't think the other Republicans will. No. I think they'll vote for the Republican candidate.
Right. They're not going to walk into the wrong booth. But they may well stay home. And just as John McCain is most Democrats' favorite Republican, Barack Obama is most Republicans' favorite Democrat. And that will create a lot less animosity, a lot less propellants toward those polls, unless some of those less happy motives that Sheryl referred to earlier come out in force in the general election.
Is it good or bad for whom if you've got a consolidated Republican candidacy? You've got, let's say, John McCain, who's the nominee within the next couple of weeks, let's say, and we'll look at the calendar a little bit later, and Barack and Hillary continue to slug it out because you don't have a big block of delegates until you come to the new Super Tuesday, which is March 4th, which is Texas, Ohio, Rhode Island, and Vermont, which has got like 450 delegates. Who's advantaged in this? Licking your wounds and consolidating, or the public exposure of a conflict?
Well, while you sort of would, the usual conventional wisdom is that it's better to get it over with and everybody gets together. On some level, they'll keep the story alive and they'll keep getting making news and getting headlines. It will be hard for John McCain if he wraps it up in a way to stay as relevant and to be out there and to get as much coverage. And it doesn't, just because he wins doesn't mean that everybody on the right is going to really like him and immediately get in step.
David and Sheryl, go ahead.
I think this is all catnip for the Democrats, assuming that the race does not become intensely vitriolic. That could pull the party apart. That could be bad. But let's assume at least the measure of
civility that's existed so far,
chafed comedy that we see so far in this campaign. What it does is to underscore the reality of the claim on the part of Barack Obama that there actually is a purpose for participating in politics. It underscores the reality of the claim that Hillary Clinton makes, that she's in it to win and this is an open party. And every time you have a contest like the one that we had yesterday that does not end the race, and people can say, oh, it was all wired for her to begin with, it feeds that measure of optimism, and that's going to be very good for whoever becomes the nominee on the Democratic side in the fall.
And and also on election day, you're going to have two candidates, one Republican, one Democrat, and and the Democrats so want change. They so desperately want change that I don't think it's going to matter that the Republicans get their candidate, decide on their candidate early, and the Democrats continue to slug it out.
And one of the things that struck me, looking beyond Super Tuesday, I'm looking at February 9th. You've got, and the Democrats, Louisiana and Maine. Additionally, you have Kansas in the Republicans. And then on Tuesday the 12th, you have the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, the Potomac primary. You've got this geography lesson, and then you've got Hawaii, Washington, Wisconsin, Ohio, Rhode Island. I mean, it's great for school kids. I mean, how much of Iowa do you know that you never knew and never wanted to know? Or New Hampshire, or South Carolina, or Michigan. Now, on Super Tuesday, you learned your own states and a couple of other states, but now you've got this cross-country tour.
Right.
It's really remarkable. Does the terrain favor one or the other of the Democrats, and does the terrain matter as much to the Republicans, and does it advantage one versus the other? Whoever wants to, go ahead.
Well, I think in terms of the Democrats, I think in the near future, I think over the next couple of weeks, the advantage is with Obama. I think as we get into the Potomac primaries next week, I think those will be much more Obama territory,
including Virginia. I'll talk to you because you
know
Virginia.
Virginia better. But I think moving on past Maryland and D.C., we when we get to March, now we've got Ohio and Texas, and that may be a whole different story, and that may be much more Hillary territory, as with Pennsylvania. So we have yet to see.
The dread Pennsylvania scenario. I mean, that's April 22nd. Get your reservations for the, Harrisburg Hilton. You imagine?
Yeah.
Well,
talk to the original questions, both of you.
Let's look at the Pennsylvania-Virginia comparison. You have Pennsylvania, old-style politics. You have Virginia, very much a new state in many ways. That was solid red territory as recently as 12 years ago.
Yep.
But it's hard to think of Virginia as other than purple right now. Governor Kane, second Democratic governor in a row, has endorsed Barack Obama. A safe endorsement, by the way. Again, he has a majority Republican registration in the state, or at least voter turnout in the state, and Obama is their favorite Democrat.
Right.
So that works well for him. You've got large concentrations of African-American voters in the Norfolk area. You can wind up, it's eminently plausible that you could wind up with an Obama victory there, even if...
And you got a lot of
think so,
college-educated folks.
I
and
think
huge
so,
number
too.
of college-educated folks, particularly in northern Virginia, the 10th district, and the areas surrounding Washington. So that looks very appealing in many ways.
It's it's really very fluid because the question when the primary started was, could Hillary Clinton be stopped? Because she seemed, she was the front runner, almost the anointed person. And then, after Iowa, and you started to get the Obama momentum and the Oprah and the Kennedys, then it became, could Obama be stopped? And what happened last night was that they fought each other to a draw. And going forward, it could go either way. And I think it's because Democrats are really torn. And there's so many issues there. They're very torn.
Go ahead.
Well, one of the things, increasingly, as John McCain seems to be the Republican nominee, Democrats are going to be thinking about who wins in the fall.
Yep.
And you really have a difficult choice in handicapping this race. Forget policy, forget how much you like either one of these candidates. How do you figure out who does well? And you have Barack Obama, who probably does, almost certainly does, a lot better among independents, but do the independents stay under the Democratic column? Does John McCain take them away? Real big question. Barack does much better among youth and new voters, and he's bringing registrants into the party. That's a great thing. Do they stick around for the general election?
Right.
Hillary Clinton is right now running away
in the primaries.
And in the primaries. Hillary Clinton is now running away with a kind of stable Democratic core among women, particularly white women, particularly married white women. She's doing well with lunch bucket Democrats, whereas the Starbucks Democrats are moving more toward Obama.
Yep.
Very interesting set of choices. If you want to grow a party and roll the dice on the people who are coming in the door under the Obama mantle, that looks like a very attractive play. If you think that those people fade away after the conventions and you want to go with a core Democratic base, you stay with Hillary Clinton. And dare I say, the politics of the past versus the politics of the future.
And
it's very interesting.
And it was my understanding, and this again was before I dropped off to sleep last night, was that, the under 30 voters, did not come out to vote. They did not turn out to vote to the extent that older voters did. And, you have this big Obama bubble among the young people, but they have to come out and vote. Older people vote. And so, that's going to be an issue as well, I think, in the general election. They come out.
But they're in bigger numbers than they were.
Yeah.
And
That's
that's
true.
important. There's a trend
And
there.
will they stay, if it's Hillary Clinton, will they come out for her? Will they stay as enthusiastic? And ultimately, will they come out because they still want change?
I think that's really a good question.
And Democrats are so much more enthusiastic this year because they so desperately want change. They so desperately do not want a Republican in the White House again.
It seems to me that there's greater upside benefit to Obama. It seems to me that Obama is potentially transformative, the agent of a change or critical election where Hillary isn't. If Barack, in a sense, has at least the ability to create a new paradigm, while Clinton is the old paradigm. So electability to me when I voted was a variable, and part of it, after a discussion with the good dean here, it seems to me that he's got the greater upside promise. Does he have greater downside risk? I don't think as much. So I think electability, it's better.
We
don't have. Go ahead.
He's the only person in the race who stands a prospect of creating these tectonic shifts.
Okay.
But right now, to go over to building metaphors and away from geological metaphors, it's a sketch on a napkin. It's not a blueprint,
Right.
and we don't know exactly where that goes. That's not all that different from John Kennedy in 1960 in terms of the level of specificity in the campaign at this point in the campaign. So
early.
It's early. I want to go back just very briefly, though, to these white men and marry in this principle of cognitive dissonance. When we think about what people say to pollsters, they might tell them absolutely anything in terms of whom they're going to vote for. But demonstrably yesterday, large numbers of white men went into polling places and pulled levers or punched chads or did whatever they did to vote for Barack Obama. And I have a hard time believing that the majority of them are going to say, whew, John McCain, I can now vote again for a white guy. And that shifts that sharply when we come to the general election. So that was very, very important news coming out of this, and I think it has to be factored into an electability calculus.
I think it does matter greatly for the general election. I don't know whether some of those white men will shift over to John McCain because they'll look at the experience and all those kinds of things and be very comfortable with John McCain, the hero, whether he'll be able to use that, or whether that generational difference between a John McCain and a Barack Obama will be so stark as to make John McCain seem even older and more of the past.
You've got 10 seconds.
We don't know any of that, but we soon will. It will be revealed.
Very good. And if I may close, this reminds me of two songs of my youth. The times they are a-changin', and something's happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear.
I wish you could sing. I wish you could sing the lyrics.
You, me. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.